Turnkey. Jeff was the president of VRBO. He helped them get through their IPO and then eventually sold it to Expedia. He became the COO of Expedia Brands while he was there. So very accomplished guy. I always got great advice from him, mostly in business, really we became friends through our business relationship. And then Brian, I wanted to introduce also, who is currently at Furnished Finder, which is really pioneering a cool area in vacation rental space. It's the what they call mid-stay rentals. Is that how you think about it? So think of about a month to 3 months, less than a year. So people who maybe want to, they get a consulting gig in Austin, they want to stay for a couple of months. I'll let them explain more about it. Jeff is the CEO at Furnished Finder also. Brian is the chief architect. He is managing the technology team there and development using a lot of AI and coding tools. So they're really leaning in on this, and I thought it would be interesting to have them give feedback today on the pitches, but also give their perspective on what it's like to use the coding tools in a production, real business. Furnished Finder is a very big business right now, the largest in its space, 250,000 listings, making lots of money and growing like crazy. So thank you both for joining. And then after we do the pitches, then Jeff and Brian are going to talk a little bit about their business experience and then open it up to Q&A for all of you guys. All right? All right, let's go.
Hi, I'm Mihir. I'm a junior ECE major. So I would like to start by briefly describing a day in the life of a freight broker. So a freight brokerage is simply the middleman between a company that needs to move shipment and the actual trucking company that moves it. So you pick up the phone and you call a trucking company. You recite a script. Do you have an available truck? What's your rate? And when can you pick up the shipment? You then call 10 more trucking companies. You compare their offers and you pick one. You then do this a billion more times from the hours of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's a very repetitive, slow process, and it caps how many shipments a broker can handle on a given day. All this matters because freight brokerage is simply a volume game. The broker who covers the most amount of loads the fastest wins. Right now, speed is limited by the number of humans you actually have on the phone and how fast they dial. However, I believe that's the wrong constraint to place. AI voice agents can now hold real, dynamic conversations, not just read scripts. So I propose to build a freight brokerage based off of agents instead of real salesmen. So for example, I would enter a load that I need to move. The agents will automatically start calling carriers on the list automatically. It asks the right questions, handles objections, and it logs the best results back to a dashboard. All I have to do is pick the option we want to move forward with. Technically, it's not very complicated. You simply get data on how the best brokers speak and negotiate, and the AI listens on the call, decides how to respond based on that data, and then responds. The biggest risk through all of this is the carrier behavior. Relationships do matter in this industry, so we need to test how carriers actually respond and conversate with the AI and decide if the conversation quality actually holds up. The bet is simple. A brokerage that never stops dialing outcompetes one that does. Thank you.
Okay, let's see here. Have you worked in this industry?
No, I have not.
Okay, so I'm not sure how you do this, but it would be more compelling if you do it with a story somehow, because it was unclear to me exactly how real is this problem. You were talking about it like theoretically, and so I'm not sure how you do that, but that would be one piece of the feedback. Somebody else want to jump in? Yep.
I know a little bit about the space because the old CEO of Expedia was the president of a company called Convoy, and would encourage you to learn about what happened there. They raised $400 million, were valued at $3 billion, and went bankrupt because of like monopoly capture in it. And so is an interesting story of like how digital freight works and why the problems got like more embedded characteristics in it.
They were like a software platform, though. Not
Yeah.
Like,
They were not just the dialer. They were trying to like fix the back-end APIs and actually resolve how you make it more digital. And then they also bought a fleet, which is why they went bankrupt. But I'd encourage you to like, I think it's a really cool niche because it's like perfect for digital transformation and perfect to innovate around voice. And so I'd encourage you to think about like, why would there be constraints in terms of should this be something an entrepreneur does, or should the existing companies hire voice agents? And what's your competitive advantage if that's where you end up?
Nice overview. How would you think about the first steps of the business? And which is more important, getting some trucking companies to sign up or getting some customers to sign up? How would you think about starting the company?
well, I think at first you need to pick a more specific niche of like, why would any like business that has shipment pick you over any other brokerage? So whether that be you're cheaper because you don't have actual salesmen or whatever it is, I think that's the first step because it's definitely harder to actually get shipment to move than actually just deciding which carrier to use to actually move it. So.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nina, and I'm a junior in computer science. So this spring break, I actually read about a story of a tech entrepreneur. He was in Australia, and he had a dog, and he found out this dog had cancer. And what did he do with this? Well, he was trying to find a cure for it, but there aren't very much specialized stuff for, like, specifically pet cancer. So he plugged his dog's data into an LLM, asked what protein sequence would probably help diagnose this. And he was actually able to connect with a university professor in another location in London, and they were able to conduct a treatment for his dog, and all of a sudden the dog's doing a lot better, 50% cured, and it feels really good when you have solutions like this. And this inspired me to think of the idea that humans also have a special 12 chromosome barcode in their DNA, and if you specifically, and these 12 digits help you find indicators of certain diseases. So there's HLA DR3 or DR4 that kind of indicates for type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, or sometimes even more serious diseases. So I figured out that if we can somehow connect medical practitioners to people who can match these organs, if in case you have an organ failure, it'd be easy to cure. So my idea was to create Biomatch, which is basically an app that has three main features. The first feature is for patients to upload their data, like a quick swab kit that is sent to their home. And then the app itself would have a protein matching sequence, just making sure it's personalized. And I found out that there are a lot of 3D printing laboratories that print organs, except every laboratory at a university or lab only does a certain type of tissue. So it could be like a heart, a gallbladder, and it's hard to connect with a certain patient at the time that you need it. So by this app, it's very possible for a lot of patients to quickly swab put their data on the app and then have their doctor in the process while this data is anonymous and gets connected to all these medical laboratories. There are some risks associated with this, so like HIPAA regulations, but we'll make sure that we pretty much follow those. And a lot of people might be concerned about their data being anonymous or not. And for that, there would be a subscription system for these labs who are participating. So when they have your data, let's say 30 years down the lane, you do need an organ. They will be practiced by having anonymous data, making sure that they have created that sort of tissue, that sort of organ, and make sure that you get the timely care you need at the time you need it. So that was basically my MVP. Thank you.
So I like the opening story. I mean, it's relevant, and I heard about that case too. So it draws you in. I also think it's for a lot of these businesses, it's always good to identify a good niche. So I think you saying, hey, look, this is now possible. we can now solve this problem for these people who are previously unserved. And to draw out that story some more over like what the most important use case is will be important because you really need to drive that. The other thing I'll add is like I've been able to download my data from 23andMe. I don't know if that's still possible with all of the antics there, but from that I know of various genetic mutations that I have. So you may be able to turbocharge this with existing data services. And so the important thing is like, what is the real value you're adding? Is it like doing the swabbing, or maybe you might jump right past that and put together these people in these niches that have this need immediately.
Thank you.
Sadly, I live in this category too deeply. I would say like to really nail this, you would probably want to figure out exactly what your primary mission is, because you kind of mixed a couple of things in there, I think. Sadly, you probably won't be able to get to any help curing people without crossing really annoying legal boundaries that are there for sometimes good reasons and sometimes not. But I think that, feeding the place where if you could solve it right, feeding this into preclinical trials or clinical trials data could be super valuable, because that is pretty valuable. I think figuring out exactly what that data is. You said swabbing a couple of times, and maybe I just didn't hear you, but is your mission to sequence that?
Yes, I forgot to mention, because the Texio was able to have an LLM pretty much figure out a protein sequence, maybe have that like an LLM integrated within the app to help the 3D organ printing laboratories find a specialized cure for whoever sends in their data. So to help that down the lane.
Yeah, so you're probably going to have to spend a couple $100 sequencing that data every step, which is a giant hassle too. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity here. It's just, you got to, in this particular area, you got to be very structurally thoughtful, because it's a giant hassle at every step. And expensive.
I think there are simpler ways to start this. So my wife has a dog that has medical issues because it's one of those little dogs, right? And there's a whole community about their special needs. And so it's connecting communities to their special problems. And if you did start with pets, which follows on this initial idea, they don't have HIPAA rules, right?
Yeah.
So there might be ways to do this. So yes, I would think through how do you really launch into something that can get moving immediately?
Animals are much easier.
Okay, thank you.
I thought you're just from the structure of what you did with a nice story to start us out, and then what I really liked, it's going to do 3 things, and you stepped us through that helps with the structure and delivery. So I thought it was great delivery,
Okay.
top to bottom.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Colin Cunningham. I'm a senior in computer science. And so cattle ranchers in Texas, compliance is not some big, dominant, overlooming issue, right? It's really a small paperwork issue that only really becomes a problem when something's missing or not completed, and then operations completely halt, right? So I'm sure you guys do this all the time. You're trying to move some cattle, sell some breeding bulls, maybe take some to the vet, or even sell something across state lines. Well, all of a sudden now, you need health records, test records, and electronic IDs, which, by the way, the state of Texas is requiring in 2027. And speaking of that, regulations are changing all the time with a new disease outbreak or technological innovations. So, and I can tell you firsthand, my family owns a small ranch, and I help operate it, and our books are all over the place. We have everything in emails or in photos or even handwritten notes. And that's actually a big problem, because when compliance breaks down, it gets expensive. Animals can't get moved and sales get delayed, right? This is a big issue. And so my solution to this is Brand Friendly. It is a platform to host all of your compliance documentation. Take, for example, you're trying to sell 20 heifers across state lines. Well, those are really specific regulations, right? There's really specific compliance you need to follow with doing that. And so you tell Brand Friendly what you're trying to do, what heifers you're trying to sell, and since it has all your documentation, it's able to cross-reference that with the current regulations and give you a list of action items and requirements. once those are all fulfilled, it gives you a neat compliance packet ready to go. And that's the really cool part about this, is that it actually has a brand, or it has a knowledge base of all regulations, and it's constantly being kept up to date, so you can spend more time being a rancher and not a legal expert. In terms of risks, however, adoption in terms of, ranchers don't like data entry that much. That's not really their thing. And so that could be an issue. But that's kind of the beauty of brand friendly, is that it uses what you have. And if you do need to do a little extra, it tells you the minimum action required to get it done. So if this works, it will be the best way for ranchers to organize and stay compliant so their operations can move smoothly. All right. Any questions?
If you're trying to raise money, you never say if it works.
My bad.
Otherwise, I thought you did a really nice job at describing a niche problem. How would you, so with you're describing also the challenge of the farmer not wanting to do data input, I would have beefed that up a little bit more. And how would you think about overcoming that?
TJ's from Iowa, so he doesn't know the difference between a farmer and a rancher.
All right. So, that's the thing. Like, you do need to keep, for just your own internal operations, ranches often have their own documentation. And what you'd want to do is just upload that to the platform. It's able to consolidate it. And I'm even imagining something kind of like hooking it up to your Google Drive or the ranch email account, or even, if you're willing to, like your photos and stuff. And that way it has everything. And I didn't mention this, but it would be leveraging AI as well as techniques like OCR to parse through all the documents and create an idea of what you have and what you don't have. And that way, if you are missing something, it'll just let you know, like, hey, you still need to go get this heifer, like, for a certain influenza test and whatnot. And so, yeah, it's not about actually organizing, or it is about organizing your documentation, but it's more about letting you know what you need to do given that documentation, and it gives you all the compliance documents ready to go for you.
So the data access and organization seems like a little bit complicated in its core to this model working. How are you thinking about structuring your build and your demo to deal with this?
Well, you mean like, how am I going to process all that data, and like, where am I going to hold it?
Or are you going to use dummy data, or are you going to, how will you think about building your demo?
Oh, well, since my family like runs a ranch, I was actually probably going to ask them for some of their documentation so I could use a real world example to kind of get an idea of like what, the biggest pain points are, and
Very
like,
cool.
because a lot of times they write stuff down. And so I think that'd be the biggest hurdle, is to be able to parse through handwriting. But yeah.
I think this is an awesome idea. And anytime that you find a way to get technology to replace Post-it notes, like you're on your way to a SaaS product.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of what the roll-ups we did at Expedia Software were. And I think further complemented by, like, you've got credibility in it because your family are ranchers. And it's kind of rare that the ranching family also has a computer science major. And so, like, solve it for your family, and then you can see if you can solve it for their neighbor and their neighbor. And, like, that's how you can build a business.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the idea.
I'll second that. This is a pattern I've seen a lot where domain expert goes and applies technology to stuff they actually know. And so I think your pitch should really start with your story and then hit like, do you know how painful it is to sell a heifer in Texas for all these reasons? We spend 3 hours on paperwork. And, with technology, I can get that down to 30 minutes, and so you tell that story, but yeah, I think we're entering into this realm now where you can build these specialized software packages. You can roll out a full ranch management software product with AI to solve this niche that was what you wouldn't have been able to do last year. So I think this is very doable.
So I am from Texas, and I should know this, but I'm assuming a heifer costs quite a bit of money, just knowing how much a steak costs. So I'm assuming most people don't know how much a heifer costs, but I think that would be helpful, because as a percentage of the cost of the cow, you're showing a lot of value there, right? Just by handling that whole thing for them. I appreciated the humor. I think the one feedback I have is I had some friends who did an app about 10 years ago for a landscaper, and it was great. It did everything that they wanted it to do. The problem was they couldn't get it to use it. They couldn't get anybody to use it, even though it was a much better product. And I think that's the same problem you have. Is it's mostly analog. It's just scribbling down on Post-it notes. In their case, it was, I think they still had the credit card machines that like, I don't know if y'all have seen those, carbon copies, right? And so I think figuring out how to make that as frictionless as possible is probably what's going to get it over the line most. Because if you can't get people to use it, it's worthless, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. My family's very anti-technology, or at least my grandparents who run the ranch. So I definitely think it'd have to be valuable enough for them to be willing to use it.
Have you seen that startup from New Zealand that making those collars that are GPS locations? My uncle has those.
Yes.
And he's moving to a lot of tech stuff on his property, but they're so expensive. So
Yeah.
it's a cheaper model. But I like that you deal with regulation because that's a whole different animal than what this company is working for.
Yeah, I was inspired by your compliance app, your little thing you showed us at the beginning of the year. But yeah. All right. No more questions?
So I would say the other thing to think about to the previous point is if sometimes these types of things have opportunities to expand the footprint. So if you think of instead of compliance for the cattle, it's more like you're the system of record for each individual cow. So you have all the data for that cow. That opens up some potentially secondary things like becoming the marketplace for cows or making it easier for people to find things for breeding and for buying and selling, which would increase the value prop to the actual rancher of putting their cows and documenting everything in that system. So like you could create a sort of a bigger network effect around it.
Yeah.
And also transferring the compliance data when you sell it so that if they're like selling it onward to something else, they have sort of the full provenance record of that cow. So if you start to think about, well, what could the next step be? That can open up a lot of opportunities to make the idea bigger and also make it more valuable to each individual user.
Yeah, there are some like ranch management softwares like that, but they don't have the compliance aspect to it, which is why I focused in on it. But I think combining both would be very powerful. All right. Thank you, guys.
Hi, my name is Lakshmi Gorti. I'm a sophomore CS major. I want you guys to think of your favorite school meal from high school, middle school, elementary school. Right, there's none. If you talk to parents of K through 12 students, one frustration comes up often. Managing school meals is disconnected and inconvenient. Parents have to manually add money, often forget to do so, and then have no control or visibility over what their child is eating at school. While students have to make last-minute food choices and end up with unhealthy options and long cafeteria lines. School lunch is one of the most crucial meals of a student's week for 5 days a week. And with child obesity rates skyrocketing throughout the country year by year, it's important that we value nutrition now more than ever. There's a growing focus on child nutrition and time efficiency, but no streamlined system that combines both payment and meal planning. This creates an opportunity to improve convenience for both parents while helping schools operate more efficiently, which now introducing Smart Meals, a school meal management application that provides 3 core features. The first one is a secure login to student meal counts with balance tracking and quick fund transfers. The second is a weekly meal pre-selection so parents can choose meals in advance. And the third and final option is cafeteria integration to provide students with pre-selected meals upon arrival. We are solving one problem today, and that is giving parents control and visibility over both funding and meal selection for their child's school lunches. However, the build plan with this is going to take approximately 4 weeks with 3 core phases. The first phase is going to be research and validation, ensuring that we get the proper authorizations from schools and school systems to be able to integrate our application into their current system, as well as taking surveys from current parents as to what they want to see in our application in addition to our core features. Our second phase is going to be our development phase where we take all these features into account and build it along with our core features as well as integrating payment systems and integrating it into the official school system. And our final phase is the deployment, where we will deploy to a control group of one singular school district and see how it works within that school district and take necessary feedback and continue iterating from there in order to provide a school meal app where parents can finally choose meals that their student can finally remember. Some risks associated with this, however, is first, the integration into the current system. A lot of school systems are very, very old and archaic, and they want to depend on that. And it's crucial that during the research and validation phase that we're able to find ways to integrate our application into that system by taking as much time as we need in order to be able to get that approval and authorization. And our second risk is if parents want to stick to the current system of just having meals and fund transfers, then we would have that survey in the beginning of the phase to see what exactly they would want to see so that we can also improve the number of users for the application. Thank you.
Well, I would say, did everyone recognize how great her energy was for this? Also, you have a well-rehearsed, perfect first line that got everyone's attention before you launched into it, and very clear on breaking it into steps. It was nicely done.
Thank you.
Now, you know the demo's due next week, right? We don't have a 4-week schedule. Okay. But it was nice how you laid that out.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was it was a good storytelling. I'm still not, I feel like the challenge on the business side is just going to be like, how do you actually make money from that? Who's the payer? So I think that's really important. Is if you try to like frame these a little bit as a business, is the customer the parent or the school system?
The school system.
Okay, so
Andrew, not
good.
everyone's here just to make money, okay?
somebody has to pay to build all this stuff because Claude doesn't fund itself.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where the research and talking to people is going to be key, and figuring out like how that model is going to work. Schools, they bid out these systems, they're monopolies, they work slowly. So you may need to like start with private schools or try to find some sort of beachhead where there's more flexibility. But figuring the right entry point is, I think, going to be the challenge. And like this is one of those cases where if this wasn't a class, I'd recommend going slow in the demo because, until you know what's going to be compelling, what are you really going to build? And it's going to take a while. You probably need to talk to quite a few people to solve the school lunch problem.
How did you think of the idea?
So I used to do youth and government back in middle school, and it was one of my bill ideas when I did it back then. So I just thought I might as well turn it into an application.
My only encouragement of how you can use the university for this, and I know this from my wife was a dietitian at UT, and they had mandatory class where they had to go serve in the Austin school district and like learn how all this stuff worked. And there may be a chance to do research by like talking to people who are in the natural sciences like dietitian program and figuring out like, well, how does all this happen? And like the operations of it, I remember were mind blowing of how school lunches get prepared compared to like your observations as a student.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, how are y'all doing? Okay, so let's say that in your neighborhood, there is this like really dangerous intersection, right? Like you see accidents in this particular intersection all the time. And you want to start a petition in order to get people on board to like get a traffic light installed here finally. And so you start your petition, but you had no idea that there's 10 other people in your city who have also started this same petition. And nonprofit organizations face a very similar issue. And so they need to rally support through coalitions in order to get legislation passed that benefit both them and the causes that they stand for. And so I talked with the organization Texas Homeless Network, which is a statewide coalition of homeless nonprofits. that do a variety of different tasks to help unhoused individuals throughout Texas. And this was the #1 advocacy challenge that they raised to me, was struggling to find other nonprofits to partner with and build coalitions to get legislation passed. And so currently they do this by sending emails and through existing connections, but the problem is that this is way too slow and it costs them way too much time and resources. Almost every nonprofit relies on government funding of some kind. And so this is a problem that every organization deals with to some extent, right? And so my proposed solution is for a platform where organizations can post a bill or a cause that they stand for, and then other organizations will be able to browse the platform and see which ones align with their mission as well. And then the platform will be able to intelligently form coalitions as so. And so in addition, the platform will be able to be on the lookout for incoming bills on the legislative agenda that could support support their mission or like fund them in some way. The biggest risk of doing this is the value of the platform very much depends on the activity on it. So how much data it has, how many users are actively using it. And so getting started might be difficult, but I plan to solve this by preceding it with existing data, existing bills, and onboarding nonprofits one at a time. And so I know Texas Homeless Network is actually very interested in this solution, and so I actually plan to build it for them. And so in conclusion, let's let your organization be proactive, not reactive, with co-advocate. Thank you.
I think this is a great idea. I'm shocked that it doesn't already work this way. You know, it's one of those things where it feels like it should exist. It doesn't. So this matching doesn't even seem that complicated.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Yeah.
I would say in your pitch, I thought you were going to be talking about how to solve the stoplight problem.
Oh, okay.
So I would maybe just ground that in this exact problem.
Yeah.
And which I think you got to, but you could have maybe just
All right.
used the example to hit this subject right off the bat and keep going. But it made sense to me by the end.
Yeah, you were a minute and a half in until I kind of figured out what we were talking about. So I think you can skip the first one. I mean, the whole thing, I went and talked to the Homework Association, here's their big problem. I mean, that could be the opening. And then you were talking about two problems in there. One was monitoring legislation, and the other one was building coalitions around, I guess, other things. And so if for me, I'd be saying, hey, look, one of the core things they need to do is monitor legislation. They spend X amount of time doing all of this, and it turns out these other organizations all do the same thing. So I can pull all that together and serve all these needs. So you're talking about solving a problem they clearly have today that you can articulate on, and then you could go on and say, and oh, by the way, there's other common problems they have. But the clearer you get to, like, I talked to this group, they're in pain for this reason, and here's how I solve it, the easier it is to, like, drill it in and communicate to everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, one thing I'd offer, you kind of closed with the piece around legislation, and I mean, I would explore whether that is the easier go-to-market. Is like how many congressmen in Texas would love to have a URL to point people at when they call and complain about A, B, or C, or are lobbying for X, Y, or Z. And is there an opportunity to actually use the regulators to seed your product and help build the network effect instead of going door to door to door to door?
I see. Okay. Yeah, that's crazy. Thank you.
All right, so how many of you guys have ever been to the hospital, either for yourselves or one of your family members or your friend? And how many of you guys have ever received discharge information or packets or folders? And how many of you guys have actually read through that information? That's what I thought. So here's what I'm here to solve.
The older you get, the more you read it.
That is true, actually. I will say that. I've seen that with my parents as well. So on one hand, we have the patients here who honestly, they don't get the information that they need in the discharge process. But we also have another problem with the nurses. They're actually dealing with inefficiency every single day. The problem that I'm trying to solve is that hospital discharge today is often very slow, fragmented, and it's actually confusing for not only patients but also for the nurses and clinical staff. On one hand, you have the charge nurse who got 10 sudden discharges that she needs to run through, and that takes her 4 to 5 hours to get through. And then on the other hand, you have the patient who was told an hour ago or 2 hours ago that they're ready to go, but they can't leave because they don't have those documents. So the problem right now with today's EHR systems is that there's too many steps or too many manual steps and not efficiency in the ability to complete those steps, right? Because the staff has to juggle paperwork, medications, instructions, follow-ups, referrals. And in this, it causes delay, confusion, and inefficiency within the system. So the primary customer that I'm looking to target is actually the hospitals. I volunteered on the med-surg floor, so it would have to be some kind of like a floor or clinic that conducts like post-operative procedures, and they have these discharges on the daily. But the end beneficiary is ultimately going to be the patient. So the solution that I'm proposing is Discharge Simple, which puts the discharge process and workflow into one clinical workflow, end-to-end, from the clinic all the way to the patient. So the nurse would be able to basically organize discharge tasks all within one place, while the patient would be able to receive all their information on the other end for their medications, the instructions of how to care for their, like, say, post-operative wound. And the value in this is that it saves the staff time, but at the same time, it also gives the patient more confidence in their own health and in their ability to take care of themselves. So the problem that we are looking to solve is, once again, to just make discharge clearer, faster, and more understandable for patients and save the clinical staff their valuable time. Thank you.
How will it work? Can you give us more detail on how it will actually work to streamline?
Yeah, so basically, like, today, the current, like, EHR systems, they're more like checklists instead of, like, actually, like, you be able to kind of do something actionable within them. So it would have to, like, sync up with the EHR system, almost like you could say like a discharge, like, augmentation tool, so that, like, everything is actually localized in one place rather than, like, the nurse or, like, the clinical administrator, like, running from tab to tab, like, doing tasks, like, across multiple different like, platforms. Like, the whole idea is that it should be like one, like, solution for, like, everything.
Got it.
But, yeah.
I think that would have helped clarify a little
Yeah.
bit better about how you crack this problem.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice presentation. That was kind of my comment as well, is I like the intro because it is a nice hook, but then I kept waiting for, what do I actually see? Like, what makes it so much more clear that I can just go through it and, check the boxes? Is it an app? Is it a website? Is it, like, how does it feel? And I think if you kind of describe that more, what the user experience is going to be, then it kind of answers the question for the audience.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was a great opening. It always shows when you understand the problem at this level, when you worked on it. And I think the thing that would make it stronger would be, towards the end, it'd be like, well, when you actually do this, we waste a lot of time doing these things. And I have a way to solve that by doing this. Because to the extent the solution is like getting them to fix their big giant software problem, well, that's a no. But we were looking for you with some sort of domain insight with, like, hey, the real problem is at the end, I got this stack of papers and I got to double check them all one by one. And, nowadays, like, we can use AI, we can automate all that, and I can save 2 hours a patient. Like, some, like, pitch like that at the end was the kind of hook that you'd like.
Is that what you're thinking, something with AI to solve it?
Yeah, I mean, so that's, like, one part of it. Like, the other way that I kind of thought about going about it is that, like, all these, like, clinical instructions, like, obviously if we have, like, AI summarize it, there is, like, a risk that, like, there could be, like, under information as well. So then, like, the the other thing that I would also like have to do is either get like someone on the clinical team like at a hospital to like sign off on it that this is all like accurate, or like the other way to go about it is that you can actually like outsource physicians who are looking to make like a quick buck and have them like verify that information. So that's where like I think like the end-to-end workflow comes into place, where like you want it to be fully accurate but also like actually like improve efficiency.
So when you think about the demo, one thing to think about that was sort of unclear to me, because it feels like you're kind of addressing two problems that brush up against each other. One problem is send something to the patient that tells them they have to change their dressing every X days or hours and take these pills for whatever the patient's supposed to do after they leave to make sure nothing gets bad. And then the other part of the problem is a bunch of internal process management steps for the hospital. Those are fundamentally kind of different problems, and you're going to face different challenges building those and deploying them. So I think sometimes you have to think very carefully about where the lines of demarcation are when you design stuff like this, especially at the very beginning, because eventually you probably want it all. But like at the beginning, especially for demo purposes, you probably would be better off picking one of those two problems and making it really compelling versus trying to solve both of them, because they are used by different people and they have different kind of objectives.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, I think like I definitely can make it work end to end, or at least I think so. I mean, I'll try for the demo, but we'll see.
Who would you want to cater more towards, the hospital and hospital staff or the patients?
Honestly, definitely like the hospital staff, just because like I have like worked in like the environment. So I'm like a pre-med student at UT. So like I've worked in like those environments, like I live there basically. And like genuinely, it's not a joke when I say that like, yeah, we like the charge nurse, she's like she or he, they're tasked with like completing all this like these discharge tasks, and per patient it takes them almost like 45 minutes to an hour. And the reason is because there's so much fragmentation and like so many random things they have to do, and it's not like consolidated yet, especially when you're using systems like Epic, which are like actually outdated. So that's where like I was looking to kind of solve that and like, yeah, gear more towards like hospitals first. But I feel like the clinical summaries for patients, like those can definitely be like, I don't think that would be that hard to kind of include.
But I think the kernel for the storytelling in there is just like, don't confuse the story with how many of you have never read your discharge papers. If the hero of the story is, I want to make things better for nurses, and here's how we're going to do that, and everybody should invest in the nurse, like, stay in that lane and go make it better for nurses and tell the story of how you live in hospitals and this is personal for you and this, that, and the other. Because the other one's it's a linked but different problem to solve.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
It's Jeff and Brian's time. I forgot to mention one of the most important facts. Both UT grads.
That's right.
Coming back. So let you have the floor, and then let's have them do a little bit of intro and background, and then we'll open it up for Q&A.
All right. Brian and I have not rehearsed this, and we have very little idea how it's going to go. So give us a little bit of grace. I'm Jeff Hurst. Anybody here from Arlington, Lamar? A lot of people in Texas do the high school thing. Come on, that'd be incredible. So I was a business school student. I was in the financial analyst program and business honors. I lecture there once a year and have for the past 15 years, and also at the MBA program. TJ did a perfectly eloquent version of what my career's been. A little bit more about what we're doing now. So Brian and I both joined Furnish Finder around the same time. The easiest way to think about Furnish Finder is there's a valley, and on each side of the valley, there are really big companies. One side has Airbnb and Vrbo, and the other side has Zillow and Apartments.com and companies like that. And our role in the middle is like, how do you go solve the connectivity issue between those things? Think about like Zillow doesn't have a calendar, and think about like Airbnb doesn't make it easy to find 30-day plus rentals because they're usually catering to 3 days and up. So we bought this company with private equity, and Brian and I have spent the last 2 years hiring about 50 people and redoing the technology stack. And embarrassingly, the main commitment I made when we bought it 2 years ago was that I didn't want it to have anything to do with AI and never wanted to hear that term. And about 6 months ago, I really regretted about that. And we have completely reoriented the company around how we use those tools. And Brian has spent a ton of time making us more productive and thinking about all of that. And so I spend more time with marketing and product and like where the company's doing financially. But we have 250,000 landlords, over 300,000 homes, which is twice as many as Airbnb and almost 10 times as many as Zillow. And we're really excited about this niche. And the niche for us is furnished 30-day plus rentals, catering to typically grad students, traveling nurses, corporate travelers, and increasingly it's how, especially people in your generation and the boomer generation, are choosing to live in them because it gives you more flexibility to be closer to family, or if your career changes or personal situation changes, you can go move. The correlation I draw to what you guys discussed today, I think all but 2 of the pitches were basically marketplaces. There were 2 healthcare marketplaces. There was the cattle marketplace. There was a marketplace about digital freight. We're a marketplace. Marketplaces are probably the best businesses in this era because you can get network effects and it compounds. And if you've got unique inventory, then you don't have a lot of risk of getting disintermediated with the LLM layer and OpenAI and how they do discovery. And so really excited to see people think about that. My encouragement is to really obsess on how small can you make the niche? Like, can you solve your parents' rancher issue? Can you solve a hospital, a school, to help you get sharper on proof of concept? With that, I'm going to share a handful of anecdotes that I share with the business school and see if any of them are relevant here. The first is some early career advice. Be indispensable as a contributor, but expendable in every role. And so think about how you document what you're doing so that you can always get the next job, but how you can be indispensable and you show up, you work hard, and people want to be there with you. The second is perfect is the enemy of progress. And so how can you do something a little bit better every day and be really curious about that so that people help you understand what good enough looks like? I think UT and every school before this for you has properly fucked you up in terms of you thinking there's right answers. Like the day you graduate, there aren't any more right answers. And so it really becomes much more about what's a little bit better look like and how do you solve a problem? The next, the emperor has no clothes. Do not be intimidated by power or CEOs or why someone else couldn't solve it, because they're all just people. Most of them will be profoundly more screwed up than the people in your life. And so take some thought-provoking initiative around oh, I can do that. Keep that chip on your shoulder. An ounce of brevity is worth a pound of influence. Get really used to telling things quickly and telling them in a way that's a visual story. From the pitches, the thing that stuck out to me the most was the rancher story, because I can picture a wall with a bunch of Post-it notes and papers on the floor and 3 filing cabinets, be oh, that should be digital. How do you get that storytelling to be really brief? Value, Brian and I talk a lot about the company. Teach, don't tell. Be sure people understand your thought process. It's more important than the answer, because people can iterate on a thought process. And one of the things that Brian espouses a lot at the company, the writers are the winners. Write things down, because in an LLM world, the more things are written down, the more discoverable it is and the more you can synthesize. A great regret of my career is about burn rate. And for each of you, I encourage you, as you're thinking about being entrepreneurs, to manage your personal burn rate. On 3 occasions in my life, I turned down jobs that would have been massively more successful than anything else I could have done, because I didn't think I could afford to make less money, usually because of social pressure or wanting to have a nicer car. And so be really diligent about how you manage your burn rate. I would have been employee 1 at a company called Bonobos, which sold to Walmart for $200 million, and I turned it down because I wanted to make a little bit more money at McKinsey. I would have been employee 1 at Trunk Club, which sold to Nordstrom for $300 million, and I turned it down because I was getting married and thought I needed to have more money. And I would have been employee 1 at Tecovas, which is a boot and western wear company that I turned down because I was having my first child and thought I needed to make a little more money. each of those is about risk tolerance, and for each of you, I'd encourage you to just like keep in mind like how you keep your burn rate around, because your option value is worth more than your present value. And then the last thing I would say, or two last things. One, comparison is the thief of joy. And so for those of you that are thinking about like, is this idea as good as that idea? Don't. Just think about like, is it a good idea? And don't get caught up in comparing what your job prospect is or how much money somebody has, because like there's a lot more value in how you can do that inwardly. And lastly, a question is always better than a comment. And so think about how you can ask people questions to become involved in what they're thinking and learn about their thought process. That usually takes me 45 minutes at the business school, but since you're all engineers, I'll assume we can do it in about 4 minutes. And beyond that, I was going to have Brian talk a little bit about where we are as a company. I know you guys are all doing this with AI and coding, so Brian could talk some about his path since being a comp sci manager and how much our company has changed using agentic in the past 6 months.
Cool. I'm Brian Campbell, Chief Architect at Furnish Finder. And like they said, I am a UT grad. I graduated in 2006, so it's been a little bit. Let's see, 2006. So I've been doing this for 20 years, just rough math. But what's very weird about this year, and I mean the last 12 months, is everything that I've done for the last 20 years has changed. And it felt like it kind of happened overnight. So, since the very beginning, I think the number one thing I was taught fresh out of school was sharpen your axe. And, what I was told is that whenever you're doing a job, the most important thing initially is get familiar with your tools. They should be an extension of yourself, and then you can focus on the fundamentals. And so, to me, that really meant like get comfortable with the terminal. If you're using VS Code or IntelliJ or any other development tool, get really familiar with it to the point where things just kind of manifest themselves. And so you end up kind of in the flow of implementing whatever feature or fixing whatever bug that you need to fix. And so that's what I did. And it feels, really freeing when you get to that point where you're not fighting your tools. Well, now overnight, the tools have changed dramatically. And you have kind of two choices. So like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years. My natural inclination is I've been doing this for forever. I'm very proficient at this tool. I'm not going to learn this new thing. It's also slower. Like I have to chat with this bot and it's wrong all the time. And so you're constantly kind of fighting the tool. In December, all of that changed. The models got very, very good. I don't know if y'all kind of felt that inflection point as well, but it got to the point where you could really get a lot of value out of these things. And so I think my advice to you is things will continue to change, and they're accelerating is what it feels like. And so get really comfortable with the tool. And that means trying out lots of different types of tools. You hear a lot of people say, stay curious, stay hungry. I think that's important to kind of constantly be evolving and constantly be looking at what new things have been released, but do it to a point, right? So time box that and then move on. Because what I've also seen recently is so many things are coming out and so many things are changing. You can focus way too much on the tech and not on what you're actually trying to build with that tech. This hasn't changed recently. It's you are building something. You are not building for the sake of writing software. You're building a product. And so if you go to a customer and you're trying to pitch your idea, I heard nobody get up here and say, no, we're going to write this in TypeScript and it's going to have a Postgres database. No one cares, right? What they care about is, does it solve my problem? And so these tools are a means to an end. So it's really important to remember it's not about the tool, it's an extension of yourself. And so use the tools effectively to help your customers out, solve their problems. By the way, there is a Brian in this picture. There's no Brian that's me in this picture. I just noticed that. That's our That's Brian, the founder of the company up there.
He doesn't work
I guess-
anymore.
Yeah, he doesn't. Good for him. Let's see. I wanted to leave a bunch of time for y'all to ask questions. I think it still feels very early on with coding tools. With tech especially, I think it kind of feels like it's overwhelming right now. But then if you go into other industries, for instance, I was talking to my cousin who's in commercial real estate, and just kind of I grabbed a beer with him, and I was asking him, AI is probably taken over commercial real estate, right? He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, well, y'all use like Claude and ChatGPT, and he was like, yeah, but it's basically just like Google. So there's a huge opportunity that's outside of tech that still needs that adoption, and that's going to be a lot harder. And the reason it's going to be harder is my assumption is that most of y'all are familiar and use the terminal. And the terminal is a great place to start. But you're not going to go into a commercial real estate company, you're not going to go into a hospital and say, who pitched on the hospital stuff? So you're not going to go into the nurses and be like, all right, so open the terminal, Claude Code. All right, now we're going to hook this up to Slack. We're going to hook up this connector. It's like, you're not going to do that. And so there's a whole class of problems that can be solved with AI, but that packaging is actually pretty difficult when you think about it. And so that's not just going to be solved just because AI tools are out there. Each one of those verticals is going to have a different set of packaging and a different pattern. And so lots and lots of opportunity there. Just don't feel like it's a solved problem, which I feel like I keep hearing over and over. It's like, we're not going to have jobs. It's just AI is going to take over. There's a lot that has to happen to get it to where they are actually proficient at those jobs. And that packaging, that's something that we need to solve. Yeah.
I was going to say, I've talked to a number of businesses lately. What Brian's describing is very true. Some in commercial real estate, and I remember them saying they're using chat and side tools and trying to get by. The market is pressuring their businesses to use AI and demonstrate that they're generating new revenue and growth from AI. And then the position of the business is, right now, we don't have it, but we're working on something, and it's going to be really great.
Yeah.
And they're like, when? And they're like, crickets. So I think the opportunity is maybe better than ever to be an insurgent business where product-led growth, you could put something out that helps commercial real estate agents, or you pick any of the number of problems y'all are working on, and get them starting to use it in the way that they're doing it kind of on the side, or like ChatGPT, and eventually the IT departments and the leaders of those businesses are going to hear about it. And that's how a lot of amazing companies got started, like Slack. It was not through the front door of CBRE or some major corporation. It was through the users who demanded that they wanted to use it.
Yeah, and just in the from the perspective of computer science, coding, I think again, since I've been doing this a while, I'm very comfortable coding, literally typing the code into the computer, and I think that skill pretty much goes away. If we're being honest, we're probably not going to be typing code into a computer pretty soon. That does not mean that problems don't need to be solved. And part of being a good problem solver is focusing on fundamentals. And so if you can be a problem solver, you can go into any of these spaces and be useful. You can apply AI to those things. But yeah, it's hard because there's so many assumptions that I think the industry makes that are no longer assumptions. They all just kind of go away. So there's going to be an adjustment period. But to be a good problem solver, to communicate effectively, and to get an idea out there, that is kind of what the job becomes. And so, if I were to focus on anything, it's those things. Work on communication and work on problem solving, and you can kind of move into any industry.
All right, questions, gang? Great shirt.
I am also a business honors major, so I am much less proficient than pretty much everybody in this room when it comes to anything tech related. And I know you were saying to make these tools like an extension of yourself. How do you go about doing that, especially when the tools that we're using are constantly changing? Like it's Claude Code or it's Cursor now. Like when the next like things come along, how do you like adapt to it?
You spend a lot of hours doing it, and I mean that. It's the same way with any sort of tool. There are tools for tools to help you learn them. What I've found super useful is in the case of AI agents, they are really good at teaching you things. And so go to kind of the meta level, and if you feel like something's taking a while or you don't understand why it did something, ask it, and it can probably give you a pretty good answer. And so if you can accelerate your learning with that tool, you should just do it. But a lot of it, I think, is just hours spent using it.
Yeah, Colorado shirt. Yeah, the most effective strategy was a global pandemic, and we were focused on healthcare, and so we got lucky. And I think that's a lot of the a lot of marketplaces don't know why they caught on. They were just in the right moment, the right time, and I think we fit that dynamic. Under the hood, what is it about the value prop that made it better for the moment? We have open communication, so we'll put phone numbers and let people call each other, and like it feels as much like Facebook Marketplace as it does Airbnb. We're a very cheap product, so there's no booking fees, and so for traveling nurses, that's really appealing because if you use our site, you're going to save a couple weeks of take-home pay every year. And then the third thing is we allow you to have a lot more control. So Airbnb has a ton of rules. You have certain cancellation policies. You have all of these criteria you have to meet. And so we built something that's a little bit more free, and I think that allowed it to be a little bit more viral because Airbnb was also getting a lot of bad press. And so most of the network effect is actually referral, and that someone got on it, got a booking, and told a friend about it. Or they were a tenant, got on, saved $300 and told a friend about it. And I think that's your, for any good marketplace, that's the litmus test, is are you gonna have a product that's disruptive versus the alternative? And we think we're disruptive versus Airbnb on price, and we think we're disruptive versus Zillow on a better experience.
What didn't work? You forgot the second part of this question.
What didn't work? As the marketer in the room, half of marketing is always not working, and so you never really. It's hard to know for sure. The place we what advertising tactic worked the worst? Probably we ran a lot of basically above the line advertising, like buying Hulu ads and paying for ads on YouTube. And we had a lot worse opportunity there because we don't have enough money to really spend on top of the funnel. And so we've done much better with targeted click-through ads, mainly in Instagram and Meta products, secondarily in Google. And beyond that, the best thing we do is try and build a better product. Big shirt.
So I'm assuming you guys came into the company when it was failing or not doing well.
Wrong assumption. But
I was going to ask, what was the business doing wrong before you guys?
Why did the founders sell? They sold because they weren't sure they could take it they were there for COVID and it really worked, and they weren't sure how to run a modern technology marketplace. It may not mean anything to you, but .NET was the entire tech stack. And so most of the last 2 years has been rewriting the tech platform. And so it was an acknowledgement by the founders that they had a good network effect and a bad technology platform and maybe a bad business to bring in people to come run it better and also take their money and go home.
I think it's kind of a, maybe for me, a counterintuitive scenario here that, I spent a lot of time in tech, and so I really like it when the tech is well written and it's well monitored and it just works well. whereas Furnish Finder, the tech, was pretty rough when they sold. And so, the message there is to get a V0 out there and get it in front of customers. That is kind of the most important thing. See if it works. And they proved this out, and they built this marketplace out with some very, very bad tech. And so when they got to that point where they were going to sell, part of that was also just it wouldn't scale. They had so many issues. Servers were falling over, and so it was time to kind of bite the bullet and actually rebuild everything. But there's no point in building it out the correct way, in a more expensive way potentially, before you prove out the idea. And so they were kind of the victim of their own success. They proved it out really well, and they got a lot of customers, and it was really successful. And so now we are, what do we say, rebuilding the plane as it's flying?
It's in the air.
Yep.
And I mean, that's been interesting in that, like, I think if we bought the company in December, replatforming would have taken 6 to 9 months instead of 24.
Yep.
Like, we were just too early for being able to use tools that make that type of work a lot easier. I think I saw another hand. Yep.
You said that you could have been employee one at 3 different companies that ended up doing really well. How did you
He's going to twist the knife.
Yeah.
how did you get that position 3 different times?
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I am not great at meeting people, but I am great at getting to know people. And so I've got I went to UT for undergrad, and I have a very big network from undergrad. And if I have any regret from my undergrad, it's that I spent too much time with too similar a group of people. And so, like, I was in the business honors program, but I was also I was a Greek, and I spent too much time with like frat guys and sorority girls, and not nearly enough time with the other people in business honors. And like, I could have got more out of that network than I did. And so then I was at McKinsey, which is a good network, and then I was at Stanford for business school, which is a good network. And in each of those spots, I was interested in just like increasingly interested in meeting more and more people and being available. So when something like that came up, like, I got a call. And so Bonobos, I had worked at Levi's, and somebody wanted my advice on like, how do you go build pants? And so that was like our spring project, and he started the company, and I turned it down. The same guy from that was Trunk Club, and a referral from his at Trunk Club referred me to Takovos for that. And so none of it was because I tried at all to be involved in any of those companies. All of it was because I was honestly, like, it had more to do with being available out at bars and parties and like just being known than it did that I was like phenomenally competent at a certain thing and they wanted me there. Being likable goes a long way in life, and I'm a little likable. Yeah.
So when you decided to make the pivot and you had your sort of epiphany that you made the wrong choice about AI, it seemed like part of your choice and direction was to look internally for the solutions. Was both internal and external? How do you make a decision when you have come to a right one?
It was not my. Basically, Brian and a handful of engineers like stopped me and were like, "You won't fucking believe how different our job is now than it was 4 months ago. Like, this whole place is going to be different." And I just said, "Okay, like, what do we need to do differently?" And so we started investing a lot more in training. We started investing a lot more in tools and licenses, and we had to just like, my job was to create budget for them to tell me what we needed to do next. I mean, I think for those of you who are thinking about like not being entrepreneurs but more pursuing computer science, like, we didn't stop hiring engineers and we didn't fire any engineers. Like, I just became way more confident that the engineers we had could be great engineers. And I became, and honestly, we paid some engineers more than we'd ever paid engineers, because like somebody who can manage 10 to 15 agents and understands how to get a lot of value out of that is worth 3 engineers. And so like, I became very bought into what Brian was describing as the people who are problem solvers with the right context to manage AI are this, they're the movie stars in the next phase. And how do we home grow those and be in a spot to where there's more of that? I'm not as, I think this is like going to be a rocky transition for people coming into the workforce, but I actually think the doomsday stuff around like Expedia's firing, Amazon's firing, all these companies are firing, I think it's bullshit in terms of like, I think they're firing because they've got a chance to fire people and blame AI. not because like AI is actually going to destroy all the jobs. I think the jobs are going to change, and how people get trained, I think, will increasingly be smaller companies like ours, as opposed to like you're going to be able to count on Google to hire this many engineers and like be the farm system.
One other thing I'll add to that is just around the fears of AI taking everybody's job. At every company I've ever worked for, do you know how many times that product has just run out of ideas? 0. Product always has more ideas. There's always more work to do. We've never run out of ideas there. And so where I've seen companies use AI effectively, it's now everything is accelerating. And so like Jeff said, one engineer can do the work of 3 or 4, so we make a better product and we make it faster. It's not that we just stop hiring people. So that's what I see more often, and I agree. It's more of an excuse when you see those layoffs, because they just want to point the finger. They need to get rid of some people, but it's not.
The other catalyst for us were right around December when the models got better. We had a hackathon, and what used to be kind of like demos and prototypes, like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe we'll build it someday. 2 or 3 of the things were like production ready, and I think within 6 weeks we had AI-powered search on our homepage. And I was just like, holy crap, like we've just built a feature in a weekend that's now going to be used by 1 million people a day. Like that type of stuff was science fiction for us a year ago.
Let's expand a little bit on who you look for if you're expanding the tech team. Jeff touched a little bit on AI-enabled or AI-forward engineers who know how to run agents, develop agents, versus someone who is just on the CS degree, right, without putting forward other skills.
Yeah, I mean, so just a hypothetical. If I'm interviewing somebody, if I ask them questions about how they use AI, what tools they use, what I'm trying to get a sense of is, are they actually comfortable with the tool? Are they comfortable with the new way of doing development? If they're not, it just doesn't make sense to hire somebody who doesn't know how to use the tools. And again, that goes back to, well, if I could hire a great engineer who's 3 times more productive than another great engineer, well, who am I going to choose? It's always going to be the person that's 3x more effective. And so the math is pretty simple there. And so I just don't think it's something that you can necessarily ignore anymore. Again, there is a lot of I think the term I've heard is just kind of an AI native engineer, which I'm not going to say I am, because again, I've been doing this a while, and so a lot of my intuition is, I think, wrong now. And so I'm having to sort of rewire my brain. And so the superpower that y'all have is you're starting work AI native. And so one of the examples that the creator of Claude Code mentioned in an interview was he was debugging a performance problem. And the typical way that you debug one of these performance problems is you open up a profiler and you run the application, you go through, you look at the stack, you look at the heap, and maybe something will pop. Well, he was looking at this and he had a junior engineer next to him, and they just took the entire stack dump, just gave it over to Claude, and it was like, oh yeah, here's the answer. And so those sort of things don't click as well for me, and that's where, again, I'm trying to rewire my brain. And if you are AI native from the start, that's going to be your intuition. So use it as your superpower.
Back to what Brian said earlier about what you're doing here is focusing on the problem. Right? You're apps you're building, the widgets you're doing, the solutions you're building, and what I'm hearing, and I know exists inside of businesses, are lots of problems. And if you can go in and go through this process that we're going through, which is listen to the end user, right, which might be anybody in any department, what they're describing as the hard parts of the day, they're repetitive, they're time-consuming, they don't work very well, and you can go in confidently into one of those businesses and say, I have been doing this, and I can do this, and I can orchestrate apps to help you with these processes and problems in your business. I think it's going to go a really long way for those business managers that are hiring to want to bring what you all into their department.
in the green. Ish.
How would you say y'all's company's approach to risk with these different tools sort of is? Like, I worked at a firm over the summer, and I mean, it was like, don't use it. I mean, and not really into AI. You know, like
It's-
proprietary data.
I'll answer, and then Brian will give you the real answer. It's interesting. Since the engineers control it, I feel like the engineers are allowed to do almost anything they want to. And so I think the engineering team has a lot more degrees of freedom and tool choice and how they use these. And I think there's still some deployment rigor that exists behind that. There's a lot less flexibility if you're on the marketing team or if you're in customer service in terms of like, okay, well, how many things will we let you connect to and what will we let it touch? Now, our corporate posture, I'd say, is risk forward. Like, if we get burnt because OpenAI has a vulnerability, like, I'm not going to be at the top of the Wall Street Journal article of like, Furnish Finder goes down due to OpenAI. Like, it's going to be JP Morgan, or it's going to be like some massive company that uses OpenAI. So like, I think the smaller companies can take a little bit more risk, and you really focus on like protect financial information and PII, but the rest of it, like, it's more important for us to go fast than it is for us to, have Six Sigma confidence that we don't have a security risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to it's a balance. I'm not. Is anybody running OpenClaw in here? Anybody? There we go. So we're not going to run OpenClaw on the corporate network. There's some obvious security problems with that. Some of the obvious ones are prompt injection, where you convince the AI to do something that it shouldn't, and if it has all sorts of production keys and it can go update data or send off your data to another third party, then obviously we would just never allow that. But if you just plot the risk matrix and you just think through, this is just normal security risk stuff, what is the worst that can happen? And you try to insulate yourself from those. That's kind of where we've gotten to. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. Most of our developers will run Claude in a sandbox. And so it sandboxes the network traffic, and it sandboxes the bash commands. Worst case, they run it without any sort of permission checking, so they just bypass the permissions altogether. But the thing is, if you're using standard least privilege permissions modeling, meaning developers shouldn't be able to delete a database, and developers shouldn't be able to get to our financial systems or edit any documents there, then it should be fine, because the worst they can do is what a developer role can do. Now, on the flip side of that, we have our SREs or admins. Now, if an SRE or an admin were to say, I'm just going to run Claude Code, I'm going to bypass permissions, obviously that's a red flag, because there's administrative tokens everywhere that could potentially lead to a breach of information or a database that no longer exists. It's not I don't know if that answers your question, but ultimately it's just a matter of a risk matrix, how likely is this thing to happen versus how bad would it be if it did happen.
Yeah, I mean, what I think what's unique, because you've told the story about your brother who's also an engineer,
Yep.
who has fewer degrees of freedom, I think, at Aura.
That's right. Yep.
Because there's a lot riskier information at Aura. But also, I feel like the way you set up our architecture allowed us to go faster, and some of the places where you might be looking at a job, like the problem may be they don't have any opportunity to establish the controls in the first place that allow you to be foot forward on this stuff.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think that bigger companies are going to have a much harder time going through this transformation. I have a friend that works at Spotify, and she was complaining about their policies, one of which is they have a system called, it's called Honk. And whenever you're using their Honk AI coding assistant, which is a wrapper around, I hope this isn't like private information. She told me in public, so this is good.
No.
Yeah. So they've wrapped Claude Code, and they basically made it less useful, and they're also snooping on everybody. And they vibe coded this really cool dashboard that you can get to internally of all these little ducks moving around the screen, and you can level up. So the more that you use the coding agent, the more it runs around and the more leveling it gets. And then you can click into each one of those ducks and see all the sessions that they're running. And so I think big companies are trying their best to drive adoption. But I think ultimately it's hard because they look at the risk and it's like, oh, it's too risky. And that could be real risk, or it could just be someone being lazy and they're kind of covering their ass. I think it's probably more the latter. But yeah, I think big companies are going to have a harder time. So far for us, I think it's been really effective. And when you look at the increased output, it's just a no-brainer to take on some amount of risk there. It's never zero, but it's definitely worth the trade-off.
Yeah, the potential for our company to be 5 times as big versus 30% smaller is like a no-brainer. And for Spotify, it's like, they're not going to be 5 times as big. But 30% smaller, everybody gets fired.
Yeah, I'll show my age. There was a day, Jeff knows this, where companies used to run everything on a server that was inside their data center or within their home building. And the notion of the cloud came along when Salesforce launched and a number of others, and it was very slow. It took 10 years, really, for that to be adopted. And a number of the reasons they gave and pushback and that they can't do it. And, eventually you had to be competitive. And I feel like if this should go faster. If you're not using AI, you are going to be at a huge disadvantage, whatever your category is. And I'm sure there will be companies that go bankrupt that don't adopt. Probably have the same companies that go bankrupt because they went too aggressively. But I don't know. My last company, public company, before AI was anything, just a little flicker in the news of something coming, our general counsel decided we needed a policy against using AI that was like that. Oh my gosh. And we can't stand the risk, and we can't do it, and don't touch it, and don't even say it. And that happens in big businesses. Like, you get really collared in, and there's a lot of forces of regulatory and otherwise working against you. So I don't know. I think it might be more. It's maybe for me personally, but when you're out there thinking about what to do next year, smaller will be more nimble, and a company that's trying to establish itself and grow is going to be more risk tolerant in this area, and it's something to think about versus a 100-year-old insurance company.
I mean, I think that's one angle to this as well. Is you're kind of thinking of it as I'm interviewing for a position at a company. One of the things that you should ask is, how do you use AI? How are you best leveraging that? Because I think if you want to stay at a company for a little while, that is going to make a big impact on the overall success of the company going forward. Otherwise, I think a lot of these companies will get disrupted pretty quickly, just because it's so easy and it's so cheap to write code now.
Who else we got?
Well, I just comment. So we've been talking about writing code with AI. I think the thing that we should all be doing is just making sure we're always using AI first. Like, the thing that happened over spring break was my kid was interviewing, so he sat down and said, I'm interviewing for this job, help me prep for it. And I made a whole prep plan with a test at the end before he went into the interview. And so it's not just about the code. I think and so we mentioned, hey, I'm not a programmer. Like, that's the skill set. Like, stop and let's rehearse with the AI and make sure we're fully prepped for everything and knowing what's possible. I mean, I think that's the super skill right now.
Yeah. Do you know when the last time I went and investigated an incident on my own and looked at the dashboards and looked at the logs? It's been about 3 months. Claude does a great job. So it's such a general purpose tool. In fact, on the kind of extreme here, do you know when the last time my wife placed groceries manually on HEB's website? This is only 2 weeks ago, but every week we place an order, and I got so tired of her having to do this grocery order every Sunday night. It's just like, it's such a slog. And we have a 6 and a 3-year-old, and of course, like, their tastes change every week. And so she'd have to spend an hour or two doing the meal plan, taking the meals, then getting all the ingredients, taking the ingredients, putting that into HEB. It's like, this is just a simple workflow. It was very hard before AI, but now it's like, I can do that. So I went into Claude, prompted it. It's like, yeah, let me write a CLI for you for HEB. Let me write a CLI for AnyList. And it just stitched it all together, and it worked. It didn't work like 100%, but within, I don't know, another 20 minutes, it's like, okay, great. So I just type / weekly groceries, and it just does everything all the way until checkout, and then it waits for us. So it's a general purpose tool. We have never had anything like that before, where it can both order groceries, debug a incident, and write code. That's incredible.
So I've been like interested in eventually doing an experiment with myself, like building an app with AI and going back to archaic times of like actually typing it and
Yeah.
using a Stack Overflow and stuff. And I don't think I'm ever actually gonna do that, but you got like a really good use case here, so I'm wondering if you have any like concrete numbers of what happened when you made that switch, like going on with AI and how much you're talking to.
Yeah, so that's something that we're trying to. That's a great question, by the way. I think when we first started on this journey of kind of adopting AI, that was one of the things that me and my CTO Matt Kinman were trying to figure out is what do we want to measure to figure out if this is actually working? Because when it comes down to it, you're going to spend a lot of money on AI tokens. You really want to know if that actually equates to more productivity or better quality software. You know, what does it actually mean? And so basically what we came down to is let's start with some of the simple numbers, and that's number of incidents, speed. And speed is kind of hard to measure, but for us, that's just number of tickets and number of PRs. And let's see how that changes, just to start out with. And so I think that's doubled or tripled. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was very obvious, and this is again kind of back to December when everything started changing and we started adopting Claude more across the board. Now suddenly everyone's productivity is up. More people can do more things that they couldn't do before. To give you an example, like front end. Front end is not my area of expertise, and so I can kind of I can get around. I don't like it. And it's incredibly frustrating because I'm mostly, I'm more familiar with the back end, right? And so now I can not only define back end, front end requirements, I can just do it all. So I don't need to involve 2 or 3 other people. And so there were some pretty obvious ways to measure it. For us, it's like, let's just start with the bare minimum, pull requests and JIRA tickets. Does that answer your question? But yeah, I think if you're not measuring it, you're just kind of being irresponsible. You're just, you're just pissing away cash, and you have no idea if it's actually helping or hurting.
Sometimes I'll finish a feature super fast, like in 20 minutes, but then I spend a week debugging it, and I'm like, what? I just wrote this myself. Maybe I should have put it a bit faster.
Yeah, and that was my first, when I first started using the tools, that was my experience as well. I think what I found is that mostly for me, it's been a skills issue. The more and more I use the tool, the better I feel like I can prompt it. Some of it is just the context you give it. Software it's complicated. It's just very complicated. There's databases, there's queues, there's AWS, there's hosting, there's networking. All of this stuff is kind of living off in silos. And so what we've done, what I think we've done pretty well at Furnish Finder is take all of those bits and pieces that are living in a Lucidchart on one system or in the wiki in another or in Jira and try to pull those down into one central location. And that kind of becomes your knowledge base. And so if you give it that knowledge base, it can just naturally find everything if it has that map. And so it really is just a game of use it more, you give it more context, and you give it access to everything, starting with read-only access to everything.
You had one over here?
Kind of related. Do you have like a good idea of how many or how much y'all spend in like AI credits per engineer?
It varies. Can we share those numbers? So, so we pay for Claude for all of our engineers, which is about $100 a month. We have some engineers that leverage it more than others. Some spend as much as $400 or $500 a month. To me, it's not that crazy because when you can measure things like PRs and features, you can see that more work is just naturally getting done by those folks. And so it doesn't feel quite as expensive when more stuff gets done quicker, right? But all the stuff that you read online, like if you get on Twitter, of course you're going to get clickbait. It's like, you know, I spent $25,000 in an evening and I rewrote Chrome. It's like, well, first of all, why would you do that? Second of all, you know, maybe put some budgets on there. So there's some easy ways to cap your spending. But we have not run into a situation where it's like, oh, well, that's just way too expensive. It's all been super valuable. Pull request is another one. Whenever you open up a pull request, typically you need somebody to come and review it. Well, guess who the first reviewer is on our PRs? It's going to be Claude. And it does a pretty good job because it can catch all the dumb stuff. And then once the engineer has worked through those, then it's like, all right, now we need a human, take a look at the logic, and then you can stamp it, and it takes maybe a quarter of the time than it used to.
Yeah, I think the, you know, underneath your question, there's a good, like, you guys are all going to be looking at jobs, or if you're starting your own thing, even better. If you're starting your own thing, it's going to be your money, so you're going to care. But if you're looking at a job and they tell you, like, yeah, this is our token budget per engineer per month, like, that says a lot more about the company's growth prospects and profitability than it does about, like, I think that's a good indicator you may not want to be there. Like, because if we've got the chance to spend an extra twice as much money on tokens for somebody to be 3 times as expensive, like, Brian has never asked for money for this stuff. It's just, we've got to be investing in it to try and go faster. On your question earlier, the only thing I'd add is it's interesting from the non-technical side to look at the company. The bottlenecks have changed in the last 4 months. And so more than ever in my life, the speed with which the company operates is more governed by marketing or customer service not understanding what feature's about to go live, or legal not being ready for a review, in a way that raises the bar for other functions to keep up with engineering. Whereas there used to be a lot more like, well, the engineers would just get it done, then we'd be ready to go do the next thing. And so it's changing a lot of how you work as a company. Like, every function is in Confluence and documenting what they do, so everybody has access to how can we do it a little bit faster and where are the bottlenecks. Yeah.
We've been talking about like all like the coding aspect of like AI agents. You're a marketer. What AI agency tools are you using there to
You know, we're phenomenally far behind. And so you know, within the marketing team, the things it's best at, it's phenomenal at market research. And so we've got assistants that are out doing market research, mainly around ad copy. Like, what ad copy is working the best in Instagram, what creative are people running in Google Ads, what type of, like, it does a lot of that research. It's phenomenal at copywriting, and so we're doing a better job of creating more variants of Instagram and doing more testing in what copy we're going to use, not only on the website, but in emails and things like that. And so I'd say it's a little bit more task-oriented in terms of the tool set we're using. It's been, you know, you mentioned you were in business honors. It's been very powerful for, like, financial forecasting and insights within data tools. Like, I think Excel will have longer legs because, like, the FP&A and accountants will protect it, but, like, it will be more obsolete faster than I thought, because products like Data Rails and how they are able to do the analysis for you is, like, shockingly fast now. And so there's we rely on a lot of the built-in tools, whereas I think the engineers are a little bit more creative in how they can go use Claude. Yeah.
I was curious to know your take with this in like the AI world of education, like traditional education, like when college, primarily regularly, and going to like things like school, kind of value that today.
Yeah, I've got a 16-year-old and I've got a 13-year-old, and so I think about it a lot. I don't have like a super strong thesis of like it's going to be like this. I mean, the thing I rely the most on for encouraging my daughter, who's the 16-year-old, on where to go is like, I probably would have been more inclined 10 years ago to have her like pick a school or functional discipline to go learn about as opposed to a university, I'm probably more inclined to have her like choose the university now, because a little bit of the like who you're going to meet and the value of the network, I think has more to do with that. I'm more inclined to encourage her to go to a place where she might want to live and think more about like the geographic benefits of something. Like if you think you want to be in Austin, then going to UT makes a lot of sense. If you think you might want to be, you know, in California, then maybe you should be more inclined to go to UCLA or Cal or Stanford or, you know, really first-class choices, I guess. But I think that the value of the specific major will decline compared to the value of like the networking benefits and what you've learned more about like yourself as a person. So I'm like way more inclined to be like, yeah, sure, get your liberal arts degree, which was not at all my mindset, you know, in the 90s when I decided to be a finance degree.
Related question. To your point about passing on jobs, is now for this class the time to consider 4 years of eating ramen and using AI
Yep.
because of what's going on, how disruptive it is, versus taking the job that pays you $200,000 because you have a car and then you have obligations and all this. You know, in other words, is now the time to think about playing it out?
Yeah, I think the two best times to take a lot of risk in your life are when you have nothing and when you have everything. And when you get out of undergrad, you're closer to nothing. And so it's a great time to take a risk because you're not really risking much. Yeah, everything's about your opportunity cost. Like, what's the job you're turning down to go do it, I think is still a super interesting consideration. You should go try and get a job and understand what your opportunity cost is. But the potential in the next 3 years to be a great entrepreneur in a way that you could not have been 5 or 10 years ago, I think is not at all understood yet. And as like from the demos, the types of things that, you know, I think you'll start to see a lot more opportunities for people like you or a few years down the road to do things that are more like angel investing. Like, who was the guy, the freight business? Like starting a disruptive freight business is hard. Maybe buying a shitty freight business and actually installing voice activated and like you've got the customers and how do I go redo it? That may not be nearly as hard. And so like, how do you guys think about your skill set as the way to revamp a company that's not going to adopt the ranching business? Great example. Like those are the places where I think you're going to start to see way more disruption and innovation as someone can lower the cost of delivery and then you go pair up with somebody who solves a financing problem and you go hustle and you go rewrite the way the company works without having to like be an entrepreneur and have a cold start problem. I think that's going to be like, when I think about my daughter, I think about like, okay, what's the type of business we can buy together that we can change that she can then go run and how do we finance it and like where are there spaces like that? I think that's going to be ripe with opportunity. Yeah.
Another question about education. What made you make the decision about choosing to go to business school? And like, I guess for us too, like, what would you say are like the best factors for that? Like, how should one make that decision?
I think you should all take the GMAT before you graduate. Like, give yourself the option. It's a lot easier to take it while you're an undergrad than it is when you've got a job or are an entrepreneur or whatever, like, distracting thing's going to happen. So, like, take the GMAT. You know, get yourself in a position to where you can apply if you want to. You know, your math might be different than mine since I was a business major. And so I had a finance degree and a business honors degree. I was only going to go to business school if I could get into Stanford, Harvard, or Cal. Like those were the only ones that I thought were going to give me a different like career trajectory or option. And Cal was only because my like fiance was like, well, I'm not sure I want to live in Boston, so you better apply to somewhere else in San Francisco. I think the math for you is going to be more similar to, are you at a point in your career when you need the space to actually be selfish and like place a bet on yourself to invest? The notion that what you're going to learn there is going to change your career, I think is fairly unlikely. The notion of who you're going to meet there or the ideas that are going to be created while you've got 2 years to basically be retired, that's where the value is. And the people who don't get the value are the ones who were McKinsey consultants or on their way back to a hedge fund or Goldman Sachs or whatever, because it's like they treat it too much like a vacation. And the people who get a ton of value treat it like, I'm here to build a network and try new things and come up with a business idea and start bonobos. Or, there was a lot of that. And so I think there'll still be a pretty vital role for that. But I think that it'll be almost like the economy K-shape. The handful, top 12, top 3, certainly Stanford, Harvard, Chicago, Wharton, they're still going to be off the charts valuable because the people you meet there are still going to be off the charts valuable. But is it going to make as much sense to, go get your business degree at Texas Tech because you know people in ranching? Don't know. It's not as obvious to me at all.
It's not just like ranching.
I own a ranch and have 13 head of cattle. Anybody else?
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Fastest missed. Everybody gets spring break. And go UT, right? Tomorrow night?
Thursday. Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Low expectation, excited.